As a Christian, we're commanded to submit to our authorities. Apostle Paul says that in Romans chapter 13, while under one of the most oppressive regimes ever, until those laws contravene the laws of God.
People know, deep down, they know that without free speech, there is no life. They're not free in any way. If we lose it, then you lose every single other freedom with it. I don't want to live in a world where this tiny little island of mine has been invaded by a million people and I'm not allowed to get upset about it. Free speech is finished.
Once free speech is gone, democracy itself is gone. Freedom is gone. It cannot exist without it. And those are laws that are damnable laws.
You may have to defend this with your life because they may come for your life to try and take it away from you.
All right, welcome to another episode of WTF, the world of Taunton and Fox. And it's great to see my good friend Laurence Fox, who joins me from not London anymore, but from the beautiful countryside, the English countryside. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm as hot as I was when we spoke in Greece, though. So I'm like, and yes, no, I live in England. I don't live in London anymore, which is a relief. London is not remotely a British city. So I went down there yesterday actually to drop my youngest son off, and I couldn't get out fast enough. It is the most, it's the most appalling celebration of sort of nothingness. It's horrible. So, and the more time I spend away from it, the more I loathe it when I go back. So I've got to get that, square that circle, because I do have to go back for work.
Describe London for people who haven't been there or haven't been there for many years. What the situation is like these days there.
London is like it's strange London because it's like when when you're at the party and you still feel like the party's going on, but it's finished. And everyone else knows it's finished except you. It's a bit like that. The architecture is beautiful. It's stunning, and all of the buildings are beautiful. There's pageantry. There's great stuff there, but actually, it's a complete dump. It's a dump in terms of under every metric. Under every metric, London is much worse than it was even just 5 years ago, and we've had this. What they call the Notting Hill Carnival, which is meant to be a celebration of this wonderful diversity, which was originally started in the 60s to be a celebration of Black and Afro-Caribbean culture in London, in Notting Hill, because, these were the sons and daughters of the Windrush generation. And we've seen yet again every year rampant sexual assault, multiple stabbings. This year, 2 murders, a mother protecting her 3-year-old son who was kicked over in the throng. And I mean, it's a legalized and applauded celebration of violence, debauchery, rape and murder. But because it's diverse, we all have to clap along and say how wonderful it is. And so the British public's reaction following their very draconian shutdown of the police, but of the protests against, yet another English kid being murdered by one of what we are starting to call our cultural enrichers, was that we struggle to understand why that they clap along to the murder of innocent black kids in London, but innocent white kids dying as the result of diversity stabbings is in some way something to be celebrated. So London is a place that I would say never ever visit unless you are forced to.
Yeah, there's something that I call the traveler's fallacy, and it's this idea that you go on vacation to London or Paris, and you stay in the city center, and you stay in a 5-star hotel, and you take a dinner cruise down the Thames or the Seine, and then you come away and say, I'd love to live in London or Paris, when the reality of those cities is much different for those people who actually live there.
Yeah, especially the minute you leave the well-trodden tourist route. But that's fine. That's London. We know what leftist cities are like. But you have trodden other routes since we last spoke. Have you not? What have you been
I
doing?
have. I have. Well, I think, as you know, while you were in Greece, I was in South America, Central America, and in Mexico City. And I've been following, I mean, the whole immigration issue, the migrant crisis, or as I call it, in this hemisphere, the Biden massive human trafficking op is a global problem. It's a huge global problem. And on and off for several years, I've been going to South America, just getting a look at on the ground what's actually happening. And that means talking to the migrants themselves, talking to people who are running some of these NGOs, brushing up against the cartels, seeing what's actually happening. Because I decided, Laurence, that at least here, I'm sure you're very familiar with some of the conversation about our southern border, about what is and isn't happening on the southern border. But it seemed to me, beginning in 2019, that no one was asking the question, what's happening on the other side of the border that is driving these people northward? Why is this happening? And the answer to the question, according to CNN, was, can you guess? Can you guess what they said the problem was? That people were fleeing their homes?
Were they
Global
free?
warming, climate
Oh, yes.
change.
Yeah, but there's a UN report into this, isn't there? So that they're saying that the move away from the word illegal migrant towards what we use in the UK now, towards irregular migrant, which they're then going to move towards climate migrant.
Yeah,
And
there we go.
it's like the left and language again. I mean, just ooh, it's just too much with what they do. So you were, yeah, I heard that Kamala Harris was, or Kamala, or however you're meant to say her name. She can't even get Dana Bash's name or Dina Bash or whatever her name is, her name, right? So, um, her thing was she was all about causation, root causes. She said that's while she shifts her entire political position from open borders to I'm tough on the causes of illegal immigration and allowing an invasion of people that will vote Democrat because they get everything free. She has said that she's now tough on the border, which is interesting, seeing as you've had over 10 million people in just this short period since Biden has been wandering
I
around
think it's
trying to
more
find the
like
toilet.
20. I think
Really?
it's more like 20 million. Yes. And if you had been with me, you would have been astonished by the things that I'm seeing. So it's, it's interesting because what is really happening, our migrant situation is very different from yours. Yours are largely Muslims. Muslims are being flown into this country, but not nearly in the numbers of what we're seeing coming from Central and South America. So they're mostly coming from largely Catholic backgrounds, stronger families, a better work ethic, and they're fleeing socialism. A lot of what we're seeing are people who are fleeing, let's say, Venezuela, and the Venezuelans don't have a particularly good reputation. That certainly hasn't been aided by the fact of what's taking place in both Chicago and in Denver, Colorado. Have you seen this, where they're taking over apartment complexes and charging people?
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
it's
so
gonna fortunately it's gonna be quite tricky to blame that one on white supremacy, which is good.
yeah, I agree with that, and yet some of these are people that you feel very sympathetic with. They're going through the Darien Gap, which is, for those people who don't know, Darien sits like a cork on top of South America, and there's this idea that people have that, oh, you could drive the Pan American Highway that goes from Anchorage, Alaska, all the way to the tip of South America. Well, that actually isn't true. There are no roads that go through the Darien Gap, and Darien's is arguably the most dangerous jungle in the world that sits between Colombia and Panama. And the Panamanians have had no desire to see any kind of road through there because they don't want Colombians coming into their country, and they know that it will facilitate drug trafficking and everything else. So if you were going to take that highway, you'd have to plan to take a ferry around the Darien Gap. Well, these people are walking through it, and you will see a mother carrying a baby and wearing flip flops and carrying a bottle of water, going into there. And it's a kind of Hotel California, Laza. A lot of these people go in and they're never seen or heard from again because you have cartels in there, you have militias in there, you have indigenous peoples in there, and then you add to that the guides, as they call them, who are leading these people. They're essentially cartel members who are paid to do it. They're pushing these people to walk 10, 12, 14 hours a day, and they're just not physically up to it. And these people are drinking a lot of Red Bulls and this kind of stuff in order to keep going. You have cardiac arrest. To talk to one woman who said that she was raped multiple times. Another group of people who said a member of their party was attacked and eaten by a jaguar. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's happening there. And it's all being caused by the Biden administration that has essentially sent the global message that America is your magic kingdom, the pinata. I mean, in California, they're talking about giving illegals. And by the way, the term illegal fits because they're illegal in every country they pass through. So it's not just in the United States. A Venezuelan is illegal in Colombia. He's illegal in Panama. He's an illegal in Guatemala and Costa Rica and Mexico, right up to the U.S. border. But in California, they're now sending the message, hey, we'll give you $150,000 for housing.
Yeah, but I mean, Newsom is a complete moron. But he will never. There's no way you can give. California's got its problems with the whole idea that a non-slave state wants non-slave owners to pay non-descendants of non-slaves money anyway. But the $125,000 thing is ridiculous because I mean this is why socialism is stupid and why you should teach socialism to children. Because the whole Kamala Harris thing, or Kamala Harris, or whatever she calls herself, that sub 80 IQ woman calls herself, this week is like, you don't.
She makes AOC look like an intellectual.
She really does make AOC look like an intellectual. And, this whole idea of going, I'm going to give £25,000 for people to start in the housing market. I'm like, if I was a private seller, I'd be, clapping my hands. I mean, I wouldn't really because of the inflation. But you don't just give someone £125,000 to buy a house because you immediately put £125,000 on the price of every house. So, and you can teach a child that in entry level maths. So if the West cared about itself instead of faux compassion and this whole idea of the fact that capitalism is a complete, you can make up the rules as you go along, which is what to be fair, the West has been doing for a long time, which is why we're seeing the end of it. That it makes absolutely no sense to what she's saying to the future of any hardworking American, and we're getting it here as well. We're being told the same sort of thing. But I wonder why they don't teach kids in school this. They go, money has a value, and if you create twice as much money, it's worth half as much. And I would love to teach capitalism or at least fiscal prudent life to children, because I think that's how you put them off these stupid wacky ideas of like, I'll give you Gavin Newsom will give you £125,000 dollars, sorry, to get a house. It's an insane policy. The man is insane and ideologically skewed.
What is happening to free speech in London?
He's gone.
In Britain in general, but
it's finished. We had no protections of free speech anyway. We have, I think I've told you before, we have the European Convention of Human Rights. So you have the right to free speech in Article 10.1. But in Article 10.2, it says, yeah, but if it upsets people, then you don't have the right to free speech. So we do not have the First Amendment. The First Amendment is being tested heavily in America at the moment, as you can see. No, you don't have free speech now unless you choose to use it, and you then use it under the strictures that you might be arrested and jailed for doing so. But people know deep down, they know that without free speech there is no life. They're not free in any way. You're not free in any way without the right to an opinion. So it's dead. I just spoke to a friend of mine yesterday who was arrested and put in a police cell, a woman in her middle age. She was put in a police cell for tweeting, "If this is true, then we should all be very worried," about the name of the alleged attacker of these young girls in Southport. And she was locked up. They took her phone. They've taken her. Her bail conditions are she's not allowed to express herself in any way whatsoever. Free speech is finished here, and no one seems to care, which I find, worrying, because they will care. But it may just be that like in all of these sort of weird times when socialism becomes fashionable, people just realize too late, and then it's everywhere, and it's like trying to stamp out a wildfire. It's really difficult. But yeah, no, it doesn't exist here. You've seen Durov in France. You've seen Kamala, whatever her name is, trying to say that if she gets elected, she's going to shut down X in America. It's gone. Socialism and free speech cannot coexist, because socialism, for the exact ideas that we've just discussed earlier, like I'm going to give you £175,000 to buy a house. Well, hang on, sir. Doesn't that mean that the house just gets $125,000 more expensive? The only way it can be implemented is via censorship, and the Democrats and the British government, everyone's very, very happy with censorship. They love it. They're really, really pleased, and I would be pleased too if I was in charge. I'd love to shut everybody up I didn't agree with, but I'm afraid that's not how liberal democracy works.
No, and there's no question that's the direction that we're headed. And you're ahead of us in this, and you've already been forced to make decisions about this that people in this country haven't yet faced. So, at a practical level, how do you decide what you will and won't say, or what you will and won't tweet? What does your decision making process look like when it comes to that?
Well, first of all, it's worth remembering that America doesn't have a clue about how bad some of the problems are in England. Like they know, the people that understand Europe and England know that it's bad, but because of how much the First Amendment affords you, you just don't know. But second of all, when I choose to tweet, I apply the old laws. I don't apply the new ones. I don't apply, these very hastily assembled hate speech sort of exemptions and extensions to laws that people constantly try and test me. I'm going down to a police station next week to go and deal with someone else who thinks that, I'm not allowed to have an opinion. But what I do is I apply the old laws. So I go, is that incitement? Am I inciting anything? And I think that's probably a good question to ask yourself anyway. So it's not something I wouldn't ask myself. But ultimately, I go, the more they try and tell me I can't speak, the more I'm going to speak. I really am, and to the point where I genuinely feel at this juncture that once you're on that path, for whatever reason, my reason is that I can, because I have nothing left to lose, is that it's almost my job to speak freely. And I think if they came for me, which I'm sure they will try, they try all the time, if they come for me, they'll come for me. And then at that point you have a very difficult question to ask yourself, is how do you respond to that level of tyranny? What do you invite the people that value what you have to say to do when confronted with a level of tyranny which is, it makes your life not worth living? You saw my Jake, who is the COO of what I do, and he's the grown up. He just shook his head all the way in the car when I picked him up from the station. He was just shaking his head. He just said, it's so bad, and it's going to get so much worse. So we are facing. I'm not, because I'm out here in the most beautiful part of the world, but a lot of people are facing fear. A life of fear, and you wrote about it in your book. and people speak about it a lot when you visit communist countries. It's just the fuel that drives it is fear and sadness and depression, and that's what we're going to have. So my job is to turn around and go, I'm going to say whatever I want, and if you want to come and lock me up, and the extension of that is, you want to shoot me, do it. I'm fine. I'm not going to be. I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. I really would.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And yet, many Americans here, I think they need to start thinking about these kinds of questions. Where do I draw my own line? Personally, what does this look like? Interestingly enough, Lori and I have been watching a series. My mom has been visiting, and so she's been watching it too. And this is a series that relates to the German occupation of Paris. And it raises a lot of very interesting questions about collaboration. What, post war, there were women, who were called horizontal collaborators who were dragged out into the street and stripped and their heads shaved because they were sleeping with Germans. And then there was a more kind of passive, we'll call it a soft collaboration, where there were shopkeepers who kept their shops open and who sold their goods to Germans just to kind of stay alive. And then there were those people who are very active, proactive collaborators who were assisting the Germans in rounding up the Jews and informing on the resistance and this kind of thing. But there were degrees, of collaboration. And the kind of discussions we've been having relate to how that applies to what we're seeing now. And I think people have to start asking these kinds of questions. Where do you draw your own personal line? Will you collaborate in some kind of soft way, or will you be an active resistor, or will you be an active collaborator? And those questions, you're way ahead of us on this. You've had to face this stuff now. The police have come and ransacked your home, and we're seeing here police commissioners in your country threatening Americans now. And you are absolutely right. Americans are very used to their First Amendment rights and to wearing them openly in a strutting kind of way. I can say whatever I want because I'm an American. But I don't think people are realizing, even with Elon Musk increasingly trying to raise the alarm. I sent you screenshots of some of his tweets, which you'd probably already seen anyway. But it's interesting to me that Musk, a few years ago, he was mocking openly Trump, just making fun of him. And now he is all in on Trump. And he is warning people, if he does not win, democracy, free speech are over. They are over. And he sees where this is going. He sees Kamala threatening to shut down X. He sees what's going on in Brazil, where a judge has just declared, can't use X. And by the way, if you get a VPN and use it, we'll fine you $8,900 a day that you do it. That's what's happening. And I think Americans have to really wake up to this, because what the left is pushing, what the
Right.
I noticed somebody somebody in the comments to the last episode of WTF said, I thought this was a great comment, said that the Republican Party is now the Democrat Party of 50 years ago, and the Democrat Party is the Communist Party. And that's where we are. That's accurate.
It's exactly the same in the UK. So, I mean, the Labour Party never really had their look. It's so interesting, even to throw yourself back through history, all the way back through history, and only with a cursory knowledge of any of it. What were the protectors of free speech, individual liberty in the United Kingdom since 1066, since the Magna Carta and onwards, for 1,000 years? What were those protections? Those protections were generally upheld by the sovereign individual's right to have a faith, right? And that faith was allowed to be expressed. We fought over which version of transubstantiation, all this sort of stuff. This was all fought over, but it all boiled down to the fact that one was sacred in the eyes of God, ahead of the fact that one was sacred in the eyes of the church. And then Henry VIII got horny and decided to completely get rid of the entire church and replace it with what is essentially a divorce court for himself, which is the Church of England. So they've
The act
been
of supremacy.
exactly. He's been absolutely abstinent. And you look at. There's a map. There's a great site which I think I encourage people to look at, and I think it's called Epic Maps, and it produces a map or two every day of things as you wouldn't see them. And one of the maps it produced the other day was a map of the number of monasteries dissolved by Henry VIII, you know, and it's just covers the whole of Britain. So it's just Elon Musk, if Elon Musk is turning around, a guy that is, like all geniuses, extremely simple, you know, he's a really simple guy. When you listen to the responses he gives to questions, they're not complex philosophical arguments. They're really simple, the way he communicates. And he understands the value of free speech. And I have always understood the value of free speech because I was an artist and I hope to still be an artist one day. But if we lose it, then you lose every single other freedom with it, which is why the First Amendment was backed up with the Second Amendment, which is that you may have to defend this with your life because they may come for your life to try and take it away from you. And that is the problem that we have here, is that you've got a huge number of people who would just want to bury their heads in the sand. I understand, you make economic situations difficult for people and they just want to get by. But B, true freedom, which not a lot of people really care about, actually. The more I
That's
look at life,
amazing.
the more I look at life, the less I think people actually do care about true freedom. It rests in that God-given right to express yourself. And that right does not come from any government. And therefore, the cost it comes at is at the cost of your life. And that's the thing that people need to slightly get their head around, because there are a large number of people there. Whenever you poll any population, there are 20% of the people who are very, very pro free speech, and there are 20% of people who are very, very anti free speech, and the rest are in the middle. So unless you're willing to die for it, it's not real. And I think Musk has put himself, the Democrats have turned around and said, they're happy to try and kill their presidential and their political opponents. They don't care, these people, at all. The left don't care. They're merchants of death, disciples of death. We spoke about this last week. But I would say that Musk probably has, I hope he's got a lot of security. You know what I mean? Because he is the guy that
Yeah.
he's under. He's probably the most wanted man in the world by the global communists at the
No,
moment.
I agree with you. I actually think, and have said this, that he is someone every bit as much as Trump that they would want to assassinate.
Yeah.
He needs to take his own, and I'm sure he does, his own personal security very, very seriously. But coming back to something you said just a few minutes ago, you said you go back to the old laws. That resonates with me because I go back to the old laws. And those are the God-given laws. Those are the ones that are, you know, um, distilled in our Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think in deciding where to draw my own personal line as it relates to this, those are the laws that I go to. I don't recognize the laws of the land that are damnable laws, that are laws that contravene the laws of God. As a Christian, we're commanded to submit to our authorities right up until, the Apostle Paul says that in Romans chapter 13, while under one of the most oppressive regimes ever. But he also points out, and it's very important for us to understand this, until those laws contravene the laws of God. And at that point, I say, nope, not going there. I'm not obeying you. I am not morally obligated to obey you. And free speech is one of them. I know that what you say is true. I know that you're personally courageous. I know you mean it when you say you're prepared to die on that hill. I'm prepared to die on that hill with you, because those kinds of laws are that would take away free speech. As Musk has pointed out, 100% true. Once free speech is gone, democracy itself is gone. Freedom is gone. It cannot exist without it. And those are laws that are damnable laws. So when I go back to the old laws, I go back to those laws and I will obey you right up until you contradict the laws of God. And at that point, all bets are off.
And there's something so comforting in that, because it's
It
absolute.
makes it easy.
Because so you don't even need to have a like. I went to a wedding on the weekend, and I meet all the. I was dreading it because there were going to be a lot of people there who used to work for that so-called free speech channel that I worked for, who had openly stabbed me in the front and in the back. There are a lot of people in this world who fancy themselves as those that would defend free speech with the ultimate sacrifice, in the simple sacrifice of what the defense of free speech is, but they actually wouldn't. And I'm trying to work out, are they more of a problem than the people who actually want to shut free speech down entirely? The ones that pretend that they believe in its value. They understand how unbelievably fundamental it is to democracy. Are they causing more harm by sending out false hope to people than those that actually, are we better off just withdrawing and allowing an attack on free speech so that the brave ones can come out and fight it than we are what I call the cosplay freedom fighters, the make believe ones, the guys and girls that pretend to care about freedom of speech on their free time?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of truth in that. How do you how do you deal with the stress of all this? I mean, we know that the left, part of the strategy, part of the Marxist strategy, indeed a fascist strategy, and it even goes further back. It goes back to the Quran, where they're told terrorize them, the unbelievers, terrorize them constantly, give them no rest until they convert, pay a tax, or die. Um, the strategy is to create a problem, create civil unrest, create unease, and then to present yourself as the solution to the problem that you've created. So they want people to feel a level of stress, anxiety. They want the media to whip people into hysteria all the time. And one of the things that I think I see here and also there, because I spent a fair amount of time in London and in continental Europe, is that people are fatigued. They're deeply fatigued. And a lot of times, people are just asking me, Larry, how do you deal with that? What are some personal strategies? I mean, you just went on holiday to Greece. Obviously, everybody can't do that every day, but what are just some practical ways of kind of pacing yourself to remain informed about what's going on while at the same time not being sleepless every night?
I think there's an element of the difference between being full of righteous indignation about something and despair. There's like a fine line, isn't there? And I think, as you said, a lot of people are fatigued, and I would say in England, a lot of people are despairing. So
Hmm.
the way I deal with it is I say, well, turn it into something righteous and indignant, and turn around and quite simply, as I said, I'll die on this hill, and let them know that, let other people know that, let the people that follow you and listen to you and care about what you have to say know that you'll die on that hill. And weirdly, I dream about that quite often because it's not. I think I was telling you when I was away in Greece, I was reading The End of Everything, the Victor Davis Hanson's new book, and he covers these, multi-century civilizations that ended in a week or a day in some cases, and how quickly it can all go so unbelievably wrong. So I go, be you don't need to be, what's that bit in that hymn, oh still small voice of calm. You don't need to be that still small voice of calm as a person, you be that still indignant voice of rage. And rage against that tyranny, because if you don't, then A, your life means nothing. And any children you have, their lives mean nothing because you didn't respect yourself enough to care about the truth. And the second one is to turn around and they fear you when you don't submit. And now they don't even, I've taken to thanking X for my, bi-weekly payout of a few $1,000s because it pays for the food for my family and my children. And I started trending on Twitter in England. A friend sent me a thing saying that they were trying to get people to block me, but they couldn't, so I wouldn't get the revenue. Which I mean, it worked to a degree, so it went down. But there's still a group of people whose comments I will never read, and I don't care for what they say, who can't help themselves but go, "You're evil, you're evil, you're evil, you're evil," and I just turn around and go, "You're totally entitled to that view. Good for you. I think you're evil." But actually, no, I don't think you're evil. I think what you're doing is evil. Because, the first strip of the onion back from the beginning of creation is he made the male and female. It's not like he made the male and female and one of them was right. Didn't say that. So you have to just take people as you find them. And if I think someone is being evil, you're right in the fact that what happens is the problem is created and the solution is the solution is the problem and the problem is the solution. But ultimately they're fearful of me because they know that there's a lot of people that think that I'm relatively articulate. I'm not particularly overly authoritarian in those ways. I'm actually a bit of a Calvin always calls me a soppy liberal. I'm actually just literally in the same way that Musk is going, if you got to be able to speak your mind. If you can't speak your mind, you're dead. You're dead. It's that simple, guys. And I'll say that till my dying breath. And I think that makes them fearful because the left and those that believe in the devil and worship the devil overreach. And that's why the devil loses. They're just always overreaching. They're always like, one more law and we can shut you up just one little bit more and then we'll all be happy. One more law about the climate. One more law about, taking away money from people. One more law. They never stop, do they? There's no logical conclusion to the end of leftist ideology because the ideology itself is self-perpetuating. So without the ideology, there's nothing. There's just the void. Therefore, they live the ideology to try and create meaning. Whereas anyone with half a brain lives meaning because your children mean something. This conversation means something. Our relationship with a friend means something. These people don't give a sugary hell about meaning. They don't
Well,
care about it.
listen, I notice that whenever we post, I say whenever, we've only posted one so far, but an episode of WTF, there are people, you have your haters, who come in and they're just dumping all over you. And I have mine too, but you've got more of them. And I've just taken to not responding to them as a rule or just blocking them.
Yeah.
I just don't bother with them because I think a lot of them are bots. I think they're bots. And I think they're designed to siphon away a lot of your energy, to demoralize you. And I see friends of mine also, commentators, public figures who are arguing with what I'm almost certain are bots. And I mean, spending all this time going at these, you see this chain of comments, and I'm thinking, this isn't a real human being. You look at the profile, and this is somebody who's had an account since July of 2024 and has 5 followers. That's not a real human being. That's a bot. And the bots are getting more sophisticated all the time. So for the most part, I just don't bother with them.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of my, you say what is a coping strategy for the way things are. One of them is the knowledge that I have that they don't have, that they can write essays about me and how evil I am, and I will never read it unless someone I know and follow engages with them. And if someone I know or follow engages with them, then it'll appear on my timeline and I will read it. But I'll do posts with 20,000 comments, and I don't read any of them, which is a shame because Elon, one of the things he could do with the algorithm is tune the algorithm to the fact that about the people you engaged with. I think they are doing this a bit. is to engage the algorithm with the people that you engage with. So that if you say something like, I don't know, Islam is a death cult, that
Which
you
it
got,
is.
yeah, which it is. We got to say it every episode. Sorry, chaps. That the top of your comment section should be people you've engaged with before, people you follow, all of that stuff. And I think it is starting to be a bit more like that. And then when you go down, I mean, I tend not to. I take great joy in the fact that someone has written me an essay about how I'm a terrible father, and my children hate me, and my acting is dreadful, and no wonder my wife left me, or whatever. I just take great joy in the fact that I'm just like, I just never read your comment. And I mean, unless somebody tries to defend me, and anyone who does, I then, because usually the most of the people who I follow, or who I'm close with, I tell them, please don't engage with them because I don't want to see it on my timeline. And then they stop. So my timeline is only really full of like Larry Taunton liked, or Calvin Robinson liked, or whoever, people that I follow and I love and I engage with a lot, that I see what they say. I don't really see what other people say. And I don't want to, actually, because this other thing that the left do is they make things, before they tell you things are illegal, they make them unfashionable. So they turn around and they talk about things like, oh, it's an echo chamber. It's an echo chamber, Twitter. I'm like, yeah, it is. For you, not for me. I will talk to any of you guys. I'm going to speak. I'm having a thing tomorrow night with a man who I perceive to be an ethno-nationalist, racist, white supremacist. And I'm going to have a conversation with him tomorrow night on this platform, or not on this platform, but on X, because I want to, because I'm interested. And people will turn around and go, you mustn't speak to him. And the number of people that have called me today have said you mustn't speak to him. He's a sort of English Nick Fuentes type. And people said you mustn't speak to him. And I said, no, I'm really, really happy to disabuse him of the rubbish that goes on in his head. Doesn't bother me at all. I'm like really happy to do that, and I'm happy to do it in public as well. Whereas the left will never do that. They just won't do that because their ideas are stupid, and we all know their ideas are stupid, and that's why they have a stupid person who fronts their stupid ideas. Because none of the people that are behind the Harris Waltz ticket have the balls to stand up and seek election themselves. They just don't. So what they do is they get an actress to do it instead. So I think I'm sort of loosely trying to talk about coping strategies. Coping strategies are to turn around and go, you know what the truth is.
But you do have to take the occasional trip to Greece. You do have to
Yeah.
occasionally get off one of these things and get away from social media. Something I did after I came back from South America earlier this year when I was there in March. I came back, I was quite depressed actually, because so much of the evil that I had seen. I mean, NGOs, the United Nations, illegal flights coming into the United States. As I said earlier, the horrors of the Darien Gap, the cartels. I came back and I just told Lori, I need. I don't feel like my mind is in a good place. I'm having nightmares. I just feel such negativity. I've got to get off of social media for a while. I need the fresh air. I need to go sit on the dock. I need to enjoy the dog. I need to go for a bike ride. These kinds of things. And I did. And it did me a lot of good. I think I planned to be off for a week and I stayed off for 3 weeks because I was enjoying it. I was reading, just a novel or something like that. I think those things are important. And you mentioned Calvin, your very good friend, my new friend. He was here, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago, a couple of months ago. He's decided to leave the UK and come to America. We're delighted to have him. We'll send, I don't know, somebody from this country to your country. Would you take Tim Walz? Could we send Tim Walz to you? But
Well,
anyway,
I
he's
mean, with a
decided.
war record like his, with a combat record like Tim's, I mean, Britain would be happy to welcome a hero like him. I mean, that guy.
Such a hero.
I, I
Have you
it,
seen the Maryland governor who claimed he had a Bronze Star?
I saw, and also I saw your tweet about the fact that your dad got Bronze Star, and also I've sat in a car with you as you cried your eyes out about your dad, and because the actual war leaves actual scars, surprise, surprise, and as you say, that this idea, and again, sorry to be optimistic about it, but I take it as a real ap- round of applause for conservatism. Because when leftists are trying to claim valor, they understand the meaning of valor. And they
Yeah.
understand that people think that valor is impressive. So obviously a leftist is a coward and you'd never want to fight next to one in a foxhole. Just watch any of the great Vietnam movies. You'd never want to fight next to one in a foxhole. But the fact that they've worked out that valor is something that your average ordinary person who's not really political thinks is a cool thing, enough to lie about it, makes me think our ideas are punching through the hole a bit.
Yeah. Well, this has been something I've reflected on quite a lot as it relates to valor because, as you mentioned, my own father had a Bronze Star, Purple Heart, numerous decorations. He was the first a part of the first class of airborne rangers. And let me say something about that I think is very interesting. The 82nd Airborne, when they were creating the airborne rangers, what you would call commandos, when they were creating them, they went to the elite of the elite, which was the 82nd Airborne. And they said, the 82nd Airborne is the elite of the Army. Now we're going to take the elite of the 82nd Airborne. And they said, who wants to be a part of this new unit that we're calling Airborne Rangers? Where a lot of these guys said, hey, I'll volunteer. And they chose only a small number of them who then went through the training and then were deployed and saw an awful lot of combat. Now, I grew up in the company of those kinds of men. I was born at Fort Benning and I lived at Fort Campbell and Fort Lewis and Fort Gordon. That was my life. And I was just the way you are. You grew up in the acting profession from the time you were a child. You were not only just seeing your dad do it, but you were listening to and meeting all kinds of interesting people. You grew up in that industry. Well, in a similar way, I was hearing all the war stories and the bravado and so forth. And let me tell you something about those kinds of men. They have healthy egos. These are men who carry themselves with a swagger. So it's not for lack of pride that they don't brag on their medals. This is the point I'm trying to make here is my father was a very proud man, but I never heard him or any of his fellow soldiers bragging about earning medals. They did not want to talk about them. They were not interested in them. So much so, I was just rehashing this with my mom a couple of days ago over coffee. My father's own medals when I was a kid, and you're playing in the neighborhood, you're playing Army, I would pin them to my T-shirts. He couldn't care less if I had lost them in the forest or if they got dirty or whatever happened. He did not care. He was not interested. That was not a matter of pride for him. And so it stands out all the more for me when I see a Tim Walz talking about inventing memories of being in Afghanistan when it didn't happen. And when you have the mayor, excuse me, I believe it's the governor of Maryland claiming he had earned a Bronze Star. Now, we both know that it is the nature of men to exaggerate their own accomplishments.
It is
We
or
do
it
it.
isn't. It is in the nature of men. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. It
Yeah.
is in the nature of men to impress other men. I was a terrific athlete when I was in high school, or to impress a girl. That's tolerable. It's understandable. But there's something pathological when you are saying that you earned commendations you absolutely did not earn. And then instead of saying, I lied about that, you said, I misspoke, or it was an honest mistake. Those aren't honest mistakes. That's astonishing hubris. And
It's
it is
re-
the sense that it's the sense I think that Democrats, people on the left, both in your country and my country, have that they can say anything they want because the media will run, interference for them.
I think there's two really interesting parts to this. The first part is your dad and the fact that he didn't care that you lost his medals in the forest, and he didn't care about them particularly. So that would say to me, as you already posited, that these are men of not small ego. They were men that prided themselves on being really good at what they did. But it would say to me that what they actually did, they weren't particularly proud of necessarily. They may have been proud of the mission, but I probably would have imagined what involved completing the mission, they weren't proud of, probably haunted them for the rest of their lives. I'm guessing. I don't know. I have friends who are soldiers and former soldiers, and I know that they do not like talking about it. So there's that side of it. Then you've got the other side of it, which is this idea that Tim Waltz, in order to feel validated in some way, has and manly in some way, has to lie about the most foundational thing about about the basest thing a male will ever do on this planet, which is to take another man's life in honor. Which is, let's face it, this is one of the problems with the modern world today now. The whole problem that America's having with the conversation it's having with itself is like, well, we stole the land off the Chickasaw or the whoever. It's like, well, they stole it off each other too, so deal with it. The idea that men kill men in honor, it happens, it does. And it's not pretty, and it usually will, if not destroy the person that's done the killing as well as being killed. It's not something we take pride in. So what makes it doubly egregious is that those who have not done any of that in the first place then think that that's what they should take pride in. And it makes me go, I have no root of conversation with you. I have nothing to do on this earth but point out the lies that you are trying to put in my head, the media's head, the population's head, and my children's head, that valor is something you can create. You can't. Valor comes at a cost. Courage comes at a cost. Everything that has no real financial cost comes at a huge financial cost. And I just, it's egregious. And this is what the stocks used to exist for. This is why we used to take thieves out and throw vegetables at them. It's like, you're so pathetic, you people. And I sound hardline and extremist about it, and I can hear myself saying it, but I'm just like, you know what? Laugh at these people. Just laugh at them, and laugh at the size of their manhoods, and laugh at their pathetic, because they don't like that.
Yeah.
Laugh at the fact that they are unusually attracted to children. Laugh at the fact that the only place that they can feel safe and powerful is by dominating a woman. Laugh at them, because the people that actually went and did the fighting so that they could do that were haunted for the rest of their days by what happened to them, and therefore they didn't care if you lost the medals in the woods.
Yeah, and I also think there's this. My own father would say, regarding his Purple Heart, when I asked him, how he received it, he said, "Son, any damn fool can get a Purple Heart." He said, "You only need to be wounded." And regarding any other commendation, I heard him say many times, "I've seen a lot of men do things that were worthy of medals of honor, but it just depends on who sees it. It requires someone to see it and to recommend them for that. And there is a certain type of soldier who seeks glory, who seeks medals, who seeks commendations. For the most part, they don't. And I think there's a kind of guilt. It was Napoleon who said that men will fight for bits of ribbon. I think the really good soldiers don't fight for bits of ribbon. I think that they fight for each other. And those who receive commendations, there's often a sense of guilt that's associated with that, because they think to themselves, yes, but he deserves one, and he deserves it, and he deserves it, and I couldn't have done it without him. I mean, there's those kinds of things that kind of go along with it that are problematic. So again, I found myself in discussion with my mom saying, we both know that my dad was a man of substantial ego and pride. He carried himself with swagger, but when it came to these kinds of things, he spoke of the unit. He spoke of the company. He spoke of what they did. And he would say to me that the thing he was most proud of was that they never left a man behind. He said that repeatedly. He said, we never left a man behind. And dead or alive, we never left a body. We carried every single person out. And that for him was the sort of thing that made him misty eyed with the memory and pride of that. And so knowing that and having grown up in that kind of context and listening, I think of myself as a veteran of veteran stories. I've just heard them so many times, and the way they
Well,
talk and the way they
you
talk
should
about each
post
other,
the
that's not the way these guys talk.
you should post the link in the notes to this. You should post the link to that article of the. Sorry, I just kicked the cable. That post the link to the article that you wrote about that get together, because it's a very moving article, and I think that the thing
They
is
didn't
that
do it for medals.
they they
That's the name of it.
they didn't do it for medals, and the sad part of this is, you were saying to me in text before we started the conversation today that we should talk about something personal. The sad part of this is that it's going to take that to happen again before things change,
You
because
said that last time.
people have forgotten. They've
Yeah,
forgotten.
I've thought about your comment in the last discussion where you said something to that effect, that you felt like every generation almost has to face their own literal battles, bloodletting, before they understand the cost of their own freedom. Pericles in the funeral oration, the very famed history of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides, he said this. He said, happiness depends on freedom, and freedom depends on courage. Happiness depends on freedom, and freedom depends on courage. Would you agree with me in saying that there is a lack of masculine courage in the Western world today?
Yes, I would say that. No, I'd say there's an abundance of it, but it's demonized and called toxic. And in the same way, I'd say there's an abundance of feminine, you know, heroic feminist, not feminist, it's not the right word. I mean, it should be the word, but it's not. But there's an abundance
Feminine.
of feminine mothers who raise kids and who still manage to, succeed in the parts of their lives where they wanted to succeed in. And but it's the fact that it's looked down upon like worse than. I would say that masculine men and feminine women are about 50 rungs down the ladder from noble economic migrants. And it's like, I don't want to live in that world. I don't want to live in a world where this tiny little island of mine has been invaded by a million people, and I'm not allowed to get upset about it. I'm not allowed to say that, what, climate change isn't going to kill your children. You have babies, have an identity. I just love it. I love it in my kids. The minute my child shows me a piece of identity, I grab it. I grab it and I run with it. And so, it can be anything, but it's about engagement and the family. And we've spoken about this before, but it's just like, if we don't have that, then loads of people are going to have to die until they can miss someone, until someone dies who they're going to miss, And that's what war is. It's about the, like Napoleon also said, your quote earlier about men will die for ribbons. He also said that he'd rather have a lucky general than a good one. And, that goes to show just how mad the what we're playing with is. We're in a hay barn with matches and children, and it's terrifying to me. So in situations like that, I suppose what I'm trying to say is, if there was a child running around in a hay barn with a lit match, you'd hope that a mother or a father would take them, get them out of the barn, make sure they cause no fire, and then give them a hiding without being told you're going to give that child trauma for life. You know, it's like it's suicidal in the way that Gadsad calls it, suicidal empathy. It's like you cannot. There has to come a point where you stop feeling sorry for everybody all the time, and you start going, because it allows true forgiveness. You know, it's a great thing that we spoke about God when we were together. Was you don't need to come to God when you're better. Come when you're not well. That's when you should come. And we are all not well. So, people should start coming and listening and at least trying to listen. Someone should.
Yeah, well, what's that?
That I bought a chicken house because I am going to the dogs, one of which was your dog, which is too expensive to fly over to America. My ridiculous. I mean, can you imagine? It was like we could have. You could have bought the world's most expensive pedigree dog just to fly your dog over there. Anyway, I'm building a chicken house. This is good because it's levity, because I was getting upset then. There's a bit in my garden which is for the dogs when I'm not walking them down the sea, which is just over there. And I'm buying chickens because chickens make the land so much better. So they scuff it up, and then you move, and it's on wheels, and then you move it along a couple of meters, and then the grass starts to sprout up again. And I don't want this like sort of dog ghetto outside the house. So Jake just walked past and held up this thing, going, "Where does that go?" And I was like, "I don't know."
We had some chickens, and birds of prey picked them off one by one. Huge hawks
Yeah.
were feasting on them, and you'd
When am
find
I
a,
coming?
a cloud of feathers.
When am I coming to see? So we I think, and this will be the first time.
October.
Yeah, but I think I'm saying this now. I think on the 26th of October, we are going to hold this rally, this next rally
Okay.
in the UK. And we're just trying to organise it now. So, and on the
So then
29th,
early October.
but we got the election coming out after that. So we've got, and then on the 29th of October, Tommy Robinson, England's most hated man, is being put before a judge, and they're going to try and send him down for 4 years. So we are going to try and get 1 million people to come out on the streets and protest everything we've just spoken about, and to remind those who think that they rule us but actually are there to serve us, who's in charge. And I'm just in the process of doing that. That's why I've not got back to you, because I've been planning it. But I kind of think we should do some election time, should we not? Wouldn't it be more fun?
Yeah, that would be good. That could be very interesting. Might
I
be
do want to see
stressful.
a
You need to
Bama
bring
game, though.
Tommy Robinson. Yeah,
What?
well,
Bring
we've
it.
got to take you to an Alabama game.
Yeah.
People are listening to this who know college football in this country will be smiling at the thought of taking you to that, because it is a cultural event like nothing you will have ever experienced in this country. And I mean, it's not just a game. My mother, who is a Canadian and who could care less about football, as you could probably imagine, having met her, she finds it fascinating, just absolutely fascinating. And I think that you and Lizzie, you'll both really, really enjoy that a lot.
Well, we will speak and try and make it work. I'm just minded that if they're going to try and lock this guy up for 4 years, which is what they're going to want to do, and the government propaganda has been to say that the reason that the disorder is taking place in the UK is because of the EDL, and because the UK prisons are full of rapists of the religion of non-rape, that people are very, very not safe in UK jails, and him particularly is the most wanted guy in the UK. So there's a part of that needs to be like, this needs to not
Yeah.
happen. And I think that's important, because I think that unless you show them that there are a lot of you that don't agree, then they carry on, and they'll carry on anyway. But it's a tricky time. Like, there's no optimism, there's no hope, there's nothing here. I hope that there is fight, and I will it on as much as I can in a righteous way, not in a needless way.
Someone had put in the comments they'd love for us to discuss hope
Yeah,
and where you find hope. And maybe as a final topic, let's just touch on that briefly. But for me, I find it in my faith. I think you find it in your faith, because I know that in the end, we win. I serve a great God. And at some point, he will, as he did long ago, speak from the whirlwind, and there will be no more tears. There will be no more death, no more sorrow. All those things shall cease. So I find hope in that. But on a day to day basis, I also find it in the fact that, quite honestly, the fight is part of what gives me purpose. Would you say that's true for you? I mean, we are human beings, we're teleological beings, we're purposeful beings. We need purpose. And if my Father's Day, it was fighting Marxism quite literally on the battlefield, and just prior to him, fascism, then I should say that I can tweet against it at the very least. I can find it. I certainly find purpose, and I find hope in the battle itself. It invigorates me to take on these kinds of people who are enemies of freedom. They're enemies of everything that is good. And I think that, by going back to what we were talking about just a little bit ago, about where you draw the line, I think you lose self respect when you just knuckle under. Self respect means a lot. It means a lot. And I feel better about myself when I resist, even if it brings consequences that aren't particularly agreeable.
yeah. I mean, it's a difficult one, because I'm trying to think what the woke argument against it would be. So, what would the woke argument against self-respect be? It would be that it's a fallacy, that it's not being true to who you really are, because
It's
what
prideful.
what you really are is a vulnerable person who just needs support and help. And if you have more support and help, then you'd be fine. But at the end of the day, the reason why the woke argument doesn't work is because that's life ain't fair, right? It's not fair.
Yep.
It isn't fair. And the hope that I have, really genuinely, I mean this as well, because it sounds cheesy, but it's true, is that the one person who watches this conversation and goes, I feel a bit more connected, a bit more, oh, what, I like that guy. I feel, yeah, the one person, not the lots of people, the one. That's what gives me hope. That even if you have to shake people awake one at a time, it's like, that is worth doing. And also, there are people that who don't even know what they can know, because they haven't even glimpsed out the curtains beyond their own
Yeah.
front door. And that those that have suffered, and I was thinking about my dad. You want to talk about something personal as well in terms of hope. My dad was giving a reading at a wedding of a very close friend of mine on the weekend, and I watched him, and I'd watched him my whole life, and he was asking me questions like, what if I can't walk or get here or do that? And I'm like, you'll be fine. He's like,
Yeah, he's pretty spry.
he's spry, but just the thought of an 85-year-old person walking around giving readings at weddings of people whose children he may probably never meet. You know, it's like this is the harsh and wonderful reality of life and faith and all of that stuff. So the hope for me is that Thucydides talked about it beyond even the beginnings of our understanding of what civilization was, and people will talk about it in 10,000 years' time, but in the best possible way. Hopefully, someone will find a little sort of dusty chip somewhere and they'll stick it in a computer and there'll be you saying what you say and I say what I say. And even in 1,000 years, they'll go, oh, I kind of agree with those guys. That's hope. Because the truth is eternal. It never dies. That's why we don't lose.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they don't believe. I just used a clip of the suddenly I can't remember her name, but she's the CEO of NPR, our version of BBC.
Oh,
And
God.
I don't know if you saw this, but I tweeted it. It is her giving a TED talk where she says that truth, our reverence for truth, gets in the way of us finding consensus and getting things done. Consensus is a buzzword, a Marxist buzzword for the opposite of truth. They don't like truth.
Am I allowed to swear on the podcast?
Go ahead. Just don't use the Lord's name in vain.
Fuck her. Fuck that evil little Marxist bitch. Sorry. Now listen, I've got to go and walk the dogs because I've got Jake over. But I love you, and let's start next week on hope again, and let's apply it to a particular topic. So
Let's do it. But before we go, we can't end with that.
Okay.
You were playing before we started just a little composition for me. Play just a little bit more for the audience, and then we'll end on that. We will fade out on that.
Yeah. I don't know if it
This is
works.
original music by Laurence Fox.
But that key doesn't work. What? Oh, okay, that key does work. It's called The Brave, and the words are, would you rather be a coward than a slave and eat the morsels, left to feast upon the morsels from another's plate?
It's perfect.
The wise man walks the walk, he doesn't talk away because he's not terrified that one day he'll face the wrath of the crocodile's gaze. Oh. Just goes on like that.
It's beautiful.
Bye.
It's beautiful.
I
Take
love
us
you.
out with that.
What, my love?
I said, take us out with that.
Oh, I can't remember. I can play it on the computer. Hang on.
No, it's perfect. Thank you for playing it. It's been great to see you, my friend.
I love you.
Love to Lizzie. Take care.
See you next week.